Hey guys, it's Julian, and today I'm going to be showing you the much requested how to PC music. So, as usual, you can get the project file and sample pack from this video in the description, and if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there, because it will be available. And yeah, let's get started. So, the first sound we have here are these chords, they sound like this. So I'll show you the MIDI first. Basically, it's playing these actually pretty simple chords. All these are just basic major and minor chords. And what I've done here is I'll show you. I've basically just taken the third. The third is usually just the middle note in the chord. Like in this case, for example, this is an A minor chord. So that's the third. I've just taken that and I've put it up 2 octaves, and then I've doubled that up another octave up, another 2 octaves up. So it's basically just like this really wide span across the keyboard. And that's what gives it such like a big and broad sound. Part of it is in the synth sound, but I think too often people think it's all in the synth sound. And really a lot of times it just comes to, like I said, like how you program the chords. Like because we have such a broad range here from this note to this note, you just get a bigger sound as a result of that. So yeah, these are just basic major and minor chords, like I said. And I'm just doing this kind of like EDM-ish poppy chord progression. I know a lot of times like with PC music, the vibe they're going for is like kind of like poppy EDM with sort of like a more underground twist. So yeah, it's just kind of what I was going for here. Like simple and catchy like that. Now for the sound, the way I made this was using analog. Basically, I have 2 layers here in this instrument rack, so they're just kind of grouped together so you can put processing on them like after the instrument rack, but you can have their own independent effects on them. And so I'll kind of show you what I did here with these 2 layers. So the first layer is this sound, which is made with 2 saw waves. It sounds like this. So what I've got here is we've got 2 saw waves. They are being detuned a little bit. You can see I've got them set like that. And then on these 2 saw waves, I have a pitch envelope. So you can see I've set them both pretty much the same. I mean, it doesn't really matter too much, but yeah, I've just kind of set them both the same. And what this does is this adds that like click at the start of the sound. Now, it's not super pronounced in this layer, and that's because the bass and the sub are also they both also have pitch envelopes on them. So you get the clickiness from there a lot as well. Like it's kind of the combination of all 3 of these. But yeah, this is a really good technique. This is something I hear a lot in like A.G. Cook's music and Danielle Harrell. Like when they have those like really big super saws, they like to add things like this to them that kind of, just gives it a little bit more of a twist. Like I said, it's kind of like taking those super poppy EDM kind of sounds and just like adding something a little bit strange and a little bit different to it. And this is a great way to do that. It gives it like a cool kind of clickiness. So then after that, I've just got the amp envelope set like that, kind of like plucky, I guess. And then the last thing that I have in here is I have some unison. So this just kind of gives it that big detuned super saw type of sound. So then the only effect I have on this layer is a chorus. You can see I've got the dry wet, not too high. It's just adding a bit of chorusy, kind of watery vibes to the sound, I guess. You don't want to go too hard with like chorus or even like delay or reverb with these kind of sounds. Usually it's very dry and very like straight to the point, but adding some chorus on this layer does help to just make it bigger and give it more dimension. So then the next layer that is in this instrument rack is this one, which is just some white noise. So all I've got here is just some white noise and analog. I've got the amp envelope set the same as the super saw, and then I've got that going through an EQ8. And so the reason why I like separating these, because you could be saying to yourself, why don't you just put them in the same analog, is for a few reasons. For one, I like that I can filter this one independently of the super saw. So what I can do is just kind of get that nice super bright high end from the white noise without getting all that like extra stuff in there that you would get, because you can't really high pass this. I guess you can put it through filter too, but to me it's just a little easier to do it this way with the EQ. It's more visual that way. And then the other thing is like having that chorus on the super saw. I don't want to have chorus on the white noise. It's just going to make it kind of like muddy and a mess. So yeah, it's just a really good way to kind of like clean up your synths. It's a little bit more efficient this way. So then on the instrument rack, like on the overall sound, I have first this simple delay. So what this is doing is actually just adding a bit of stereo effect. What I have here is I have the dry wet, completely wet, and I've set the time of the left ear to 1 millisecond, and then of the right ear to like 16 milliseconds. This is a really good way to do like a nice big stereo effect. If I turn it off, you can hear it's very mono. But yeah, then when we turn it on, it gives it some nice stereo width. Then after that, I just have a compressor side chaining it to the kick. And then I have this EQ8 cutting out a bit of low end here and a little bit of this low mid-range as well. And then boosting the highs a bit there. So that is the chords. The next sound we have here is this lead, which sounds like this. So I'll show you the notes first. This is a pretty simple melody. Again, I was going for kind of like a happy, poppy EDM with like kind of an underground vibe, I guess you could say. It's just kind of like this nice melody that plays over the chords well. It's kind of like trancey, you know? Like with those notes there and how the chords play off of them. And like, yeah, that's kind of the vibe here. Like I said, like happy, pop, EDM, trance is like probably the best words I can use to describe this. So then for the sound here, I made this with Operator. It's actually a pretty simple saw wave lead, but then I've got a little bit of FM going on. So what I've got here is I've got a saw wave, and then I'm using this second saw wave here to do some FM. You can see the level isn't super high, and then I have that detune. So that's what's giving it that cool kind of like detune sound. There's with no detuning. And then there's with it. It sounds really cool. I like doing this a lot, and it helps to differentiate it from the chords as well, especially since these are both saw wave sounds. Since the chords are a lot more like chorusy, and like in the low end as well, and then the lead is a little bit more like detuned, but very like clean and flat. It works really well. Like it's a nice combination, even though they're both saw waves. They don't get in the way of each other. Then the only other thing I have an operator here is I just have this pitch envelope. You can see I've got it at minus 100, and then it's doing this, so it's pitching up. This is another thing that differentiates it from the chords, because the chords have a pitch envelope going down as well as the bass and the sub. So this one's going up. So when you hear that little at the start of the sound, it kind of, again, like helps your brain or your ears kind of like differentiate it from the other layers. So then after that, I've got that same simple delay little stereo effect that I had on the chords. And then I've got a bit of compression, just side chaining it to the kick. And then finally, I just have an EQ8 cutting at the low end. This is actually the same one as the chords as well. It sounded pretty good on this lead. So yeah, the next layer we have here is this bass, which sounds like this. So this is two layers. This sort of like mid-range bass, and then the sub. So the mid-range bass is made in analog. It's just playing the root notes of all the chords, the same pattern as the chords that I showed you before. What this is it's two saw waves. One of them is detuned a little bit, and I got those going through a low-pass filter, which has an envelope on it. I also have a pitch envelope on the sound, like I was saying. Yeah, it's just kind of on both oscillators there. And then after that, I've got the amplitude envelope set like that, and then I've got a bit of unison going on. So similar to what I had with the chords, just kind of like gives it that big, wide, kind of like stereo sound. Then after that, I have a bit of chorus to give it a bit more dimension and a bit more of like a detune kind of vibe. And then finally, I just have a compressor, side chaining it to the kick, and then an EQ8 cutting out the low end, because you don't want this one to have too much low end in it, so you can have some room for the sub. So then for the sub, I made this with the operator. What it is two sine waves doing a bit of FM. You can see I've got them in the same octave. I like doing it this way instead of just using like a sine wave like on its own with no FM, because this has a little bit more harmonic content. So now you're hearing it as well as feeling it. Whereas with a sine wave, you would really just be feeling it, and you can't really hear it on like a phone speaker or anything like that. So then the only thing that I have an operator there is I've also got this pitch envelope on here. You can see I just kind of have it set like that. Gives it that clickiness at the start of the sound. Then after that, I have a bit of saturation to kind of help give it some more harmonic content and help glue it to the other bass as well. You can see I've got it set like this. I've just turned up the drive a bit, and then I've got the color set to the sinoid fold mode, so it's just a little bit more intense. Then after that, finally, I just have some compression, side chaining into the kick, and that is it for the bass and the synths. So the next thing that I have here is this little riser, which sounds like this. So the way I made this was actually using operator and then a bit of grain delay. What I did here is I just have some white noise, and then that's going into a bandpass filter, which is just sweeping up. Like that. I've got a bit of resonance, so that's why it's kind of like windy sounding. Then after that, I've just got this grain delay on here. Grain delay is really good for these kind of like PC music style, like sort of very clean and dry, but still interesting and textured effects. Yeah, it's just a really good way to get those kind of sounds where, again, it's not going to be like super reverbed out or super, delay-y, I guess, if that's a word. But again, it just gives it like a cool sort of like futuristic texture. So that's what I did here. I just set it like this. Really not too much to it, just kind of like playing around, and this is the sound that I found. That was a lot of rhyming words. Then after that, I've got this auto pan, and what this is doing is I have it set to mono, the phase is at 0, and then the rate is just kind of like automating. And that's what's giving it that like volume sort of modulation there. So that's that riser. The next sound I have here is the second riser, which sounds like this. So this is another sort of like simple synthesis and grain delay combination. Basically, we just have these two square waves in analog. You can see they're just set like that. One is an octave down. I've got the amplitude envelope set like that. And then I've got a bit of unison on those. And then after that, I added this grain delay, which is set like this. And with this one, what I'm automating is the pitch. So I'm just taking it from the lowest setting to the highest setting. And that's how we're getting sort of like the pitch rise there. Then after that, I've just got a compressor sidechaining it to the kick. I sidechained this one because it was playing with all the other instruments and I didn't want it to be too loud in the mix. Then after that, I've just got an EQ8 cutting out the low end. And then finally, I have this utility, which is just sort of building up there. With risers like this, when you make them on your own, it's good to have something like this that's just kind of like building up there in volume. Like, you don't want it to just start at the same volume that it ends at, or it doesn't build as much tension. The next sound I have here is this white noise, which sounds like this. This one's really simple. It's just some white noise and operator. I've got it going through a bandpass filter, which is being modulated, you can see, or automated. I just have it, going down like that. Pretty simple. Then I've got a bit of grain delay on that. It's just set like this, so kind of like a fast grain delay. I've got the pitch at 12. That's what's giving it kind of like a cool texture. Then I've just got a bit of reverb to give it some space and make it less abrupt when it ends, so it doesn't just cut off right at bar 13 there. And then I've just got a compressor sidechaining into the kick. And finally, an EQ8 cutting out all the low end. So then the next thing we have here are the drums, which sound like this. So they're pretty simple. The first thing I have here is this kick, which sounds like this on its own. It's just kind of like a tight, like punchy, sort of like high tuned kick. You can see I actually went in here and tuned the kick a little bit. So we are in the key of A minor for this track. So if you look at this tuner here, it's hitting A. And so, basically I just did these things here to kind of like tune it. And this is pretty important for this style. If you want to have like a really, really clean track where everything is like really just powerful and clean and not like too muddy or messy, I really recommend trying to tune your kicks like this and tune your drums in general, like any drum that has like a pitch to it like this kick does. So that's what I did here. I just put the tuner on and then I used the transpose and the detune to get it in tune. And you have to watch out for the detune too, because sometimes like you'll get it like this with the transpose. You can see how it's hitting A, but it's out of tune. Like it's not quite A. It's a little bit off. So I just used the detune there to like make it perfect. There we go. And you may not hear it on your speakers or on your headphones or whatever, but a lot of times if you play your track on like a club system and the kick is like slightly out of tune like that with that detune, you'll hear like some really weird stuff going on between the bass and the kick that you wouldn't have heard at home. So then the next layer we have here is the snare clap thing, which sounds like this. And so this is 2 layers. We have this little snare and then this clap. So I'll show you the snare first. So this is actually made in a little bit of a different way. So I hear a lot in these PC music tracks. They have these, especially like A.G. Cook, and like in a lot of tracks, like Hey Cutie, for example, has one of these kind of snares where it's sort of like a very, very soft, like sort of bright, high-endy snare. And I think that the way they're doing it is by recording someone going like or like or something like that and using that as a snare. So that's what I did here. I have this recording where I basically recorded myself doing that a bunch of times into this mic. You can hear it there. And I just took one of those and kind of like found the best part of it here. And then that was pretty much all I did. I gave it a little bit of a bandpass filter with an envelope just to kind of accentuate the like factor. And then after that I just have a bit of erosion. And then finally I have an EQ8 cutting out the low end and then boosting some highs a little bit. And then the only other layer in there is this clap. sounds like that. This is another thing I hear a lot. Like, it'll either be just this snare or this snare layered with this kind of like, sort of like roomy, like group sort of clap sound. Like, it sounds like a group of people clapping. So I just took one of those in here, and then I high passed it a little bit because you don't want it to be too much in the low end. And this sample, you can see, did actually have a bit of low end going on. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this one, guys. I just want to show you some techniques. I got a bunch of requests for this one, so figured it was finally time. So that's me it for today, guys. Make sure to let me know what you think of this video in the comments, and make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. Once again, you get the project file and sample pack from this video in the description, so make sure to check that out. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because it will be available. Thank you again, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.